Hello and welcome to DNET, the Disability Network. I'm Bill McQueen.
And I'm Ming Wong. Today's program has an international flavor to it. In a moment, when we turn our attention to movies, we'll take a look at Frankie Starlight. The story takes place in Ireland and Texas. And later in the show, we'll go to Switzerland. People from around the world, including many people with disabilities, got together in September. They were there to share information on the benefits of relationships between people and animals. They were joined in Geneva by guide dogs and other service dogs of many nationalities.
Also in today's program, we have the last installment of our series on Ian and Lisa's home renovations. We'll see how they went about shopping for and financing their dream home. First, here are two stories related to moviegoing, something we all like to do during this holiday season. Enjoying a movie at a local theater used to be a frustrating, if not impossible, experience for many people who are hard of hearing. But the introduction of advanced audio technology has changed all that. Or has it? Terry Matty reports on one woman's recent theater-going experience in the Ottawa area.
You're my favorite deputy. You got a friend in me.
For people with severe hearing problems, the special receivers are essential. At the Famous Players Complex in the Gloucester Town Centre, anybody can ask for one. There is no charge. Mike Noguera, a regional manager with Famous Players, demonstrates how they work.
Above the screen.
Right. The receivers get the sound from an infrared signal that comes from a black box above the screen.
You just hold it in front of you.
You hold it in front of you, it sits on top. You put it right over your head.
Right.
Like this.
Right, that's so you can aim it at the...
aim it at the infrared transmitter, yes.
Right.
And you put it right on.
Right. Get good sound with this?
Very good sound.
Yeah.
Yes.
But Veronica Healy says the devices often do not work. She's a former director of the Canadian Hard of Hearing Association, and she's been campaigning to get the theaters to clean up their act. On November 12th, she went to the Cineplex Odeon Theatre in Orleans to see the movie Home for the Holidays.
This time, the two small earpieces that fit in one's ears were missing, and the assistant manager suggested I try it as is, and I told him that wasn't possible, that could get the sound in. And I said to him, this is ridiculous, I've made complaints before and it's not getting any better, you don't care. He didn't, and I got a refund and left with my friends.
Healy went to the Famous Players Theatre in the Gloucester Town Centre, but she couldn't get a working receiver here either.
So that's two theaters on the same night?
On the same night. A bad record.
You went to an awful lot of effort to see that movie.
I did, and I still haven't seen it. I haven't been back to a cinema since November the 12th.
Healy also has had problems at the Cineplex Odeon theaters in the Saint Laurent Shopping Centre and the World Exchange Plaza.
From August to the middle of November, I've gone to 12 movies, or tried to. I've had to walk out of 6 because of either lack of equipment or malfunctioning equipment.
Cineplex Odeon declined an on-camera interview, but the company says it has asked its managers to check the hearing devices.
That's all.
Mike Noguera of Famous Players says there is not a big demand for the receivers.
We can go a month or 2 months or 3 months without them ever being used.
Nobody had ever asked for one?
No one would ever ask for one. So one of the problems that sometimes occurs, maybe the batteries are sitting in it for such a long time and they're not being used and the battery dies out. We have started now a weekly walkthrough in which these will be monitored on a weekly basis so that we know that they are working.
And Noguera says his staff members are getting extra training. It does seem that Veronica Healy's campaign is having some effect.
So you're promising to do better?
We're going to do a lot better.
Originally, Veronica Healy filed a human rights complaint. Once theater management indicated their commitment to improve service, she withdrew the complaint. The film, Frankie Starlight, was released a few weeks ago, in time for the holidays. It was produced by Michael Lindsay Hogg, the producer of My Left Foot. The movie introduces Alan Pettany as Frankie. Leslie Wasserman reviewed the film for CBC.
The story is that those two fell in love and they forgot to say their prayers. And so the gods decided to punish them by putting a river between them. And that became known as the Milky Way.
He's called Frankie Starlight because he's fascinated with the beauty and mystery of Dublin's universe.
A telescope.
What else?
He's a boy of small stature with a huge gift of intelligence. His mother was a stowaway from Paris. Gabriel Byrne plays a customs officer who becomes his mother's lover and helps raise Frankie. The movie is based on the novel The Dork of Cork and is directed by Michael Lindsay Hogg.
One of the things that interested the writer, Chet, is beauty and how much it affects all our lives. Beauty of all sorts, physical beauty, cosmetic beauty, and the beauty of the heavens and the stars.
You are different. It's just something that happens.
Frankie manages to overcome the adversity he faces as a small person. He becomes a successful writer and eventually finds love.
Frankie Starlight is playing at theaters across Canada. Alan Pettany is one of many people with achondroplasia. Historically labeled as dwarfs, they prefer to be known as little people. Little People have been organizing in Canada and worldwide for decades, offering support to their members. They believe the biggest problems they face are the attitudes of a society still entrenched in old images of mythical characters, of circuses, and wrestling rings.
It's very hard to watch, but because...
Benoit Durand is a member of Little People of Ontario. He went to see the film last week.
But it's essential that people be exposed.
Frankie, you see that star over there? The brightest star of all?
Yeah?
That's known as Vega.
I went to see it with friends of mine, other little people, and after discussing it with them, we concluded that Frankie's character relates to our own lives in terms of isolation and rejections from the mainstream community of average-sized people.
Little lady.
Do you think Lisa and Charlene would like me?
Sure.
Frankie's own experience parallel some of mine, and in that manner makes the movie very hard to watch. We see Frankie from his birth being treated as ugly, and we see how it affects him, his mothers, and other people surrounding him. The film is very honest in that manner. It doesn't hide those issues. In movies, we are usually shown as mythical characters, clowns, objective derision, nothing to do with reality.
Where'd you learn all this stuff?
The innovation was to portray somebody that is real.
Well, you know about motorcycles, Terry, but I know about the sky.
If I had to recommend that movie to other people, average-sized children, I would make sure to let them understand that this is the real life of a real little person.
By the way, this is the 30th anniversary of the founding of Little People of Canada.
When we come back, we'll look at a relationship that's evolving on an international scale, the partnerships between animals and people with disabilities.
This program is brought to you in part by the Royal Bank of Canada, serving Canadians for 126 years, one customer at a time.
There's always been an interdependency between people and animals. That's been especially true with dogs. Probably one of the most well-recognized relationships is the partnership between people who are blind and guide dogs. In the last 2 decades, however, there has been an increasing role for animals in the way they provide support to people with disabilities. These relationships are explored every 3 years at international human-animal bond conferences. Susan Pettit-Crossman went to this year's conference, which was held in September.
Dogs and people, we see them walking everywhere, and a guide dog leading someone on the street has become a common sight. Seeing Eye Dog schools had their roots in Frankfurt, Germany. But in 1927, a Mrs. Dorothy Eustace from the United States was the first to take interest in the dog guide, as they were referred to then. She contacted Fortune Fields, a Seeing Eye Dog school in Switzerland. Our story today takes us to that country, home to the International Red Cross and the United Nations, where the dignity and well-being of all people is recognized. How fitting that it is also the setting of the 7th Conference on the Human-Animal Bond, where the dignity and the value of non-human beings is being officially and scientifically acknowledged. Ian Robinson is the Pet Ownership Studies Manager of the Waltham Centre for Pet Nutrition.
We see animals used to help children with learning difficulties. Animals are being used to help people who are terminally ill, older people, people in prisons, and people with various forms of disabilities can all benefit from interactions with animals.
Over 600 people from 30 countries attended this conference. Presentations range from scientific papers on the positive effects of pet ownership for people who've had a heart attack to the role that an animal plays in helping women and children recover from abuse. But the service dog demonstration was one of the highlights of the conference. Elizabeth Farbinger is a biologist and dog trainer. Although she's not disabled herself, she's gained a great deal of first-hand knowledge about the needs of people with disabilities. Her father used a wheelchair. She founded a school called Partner Dogs for the Disabled near Salzburg, Austria. It's one of the first of its kind. Service dogs for the disabled become 24-hour companions on 4 legs. They help people with disabilities accomplish many everyday household tasks. Dusty the sous chef assists in the kitchen. Ella's no slouch in the kitchen either. Breakfast, anyone? Particularly where muscle weakness is concerned, a dog like Dusty could save someone's life. Not only can Ella stop on a dime, she can pick it up too. Labradors and Golden Retrievers are the breeds best suited for the role of a service dog. Given the shortage of good stock in Europe, Elizabeth has developed her own breeding program. Simple tasks like turning off a light, listening for doorbells, or retrieving an assistive device are essential to a person with a disability and give them the freedom and independence to manage their own lives. When the day's work is done, there's still time to take a break and get out for a quick bite to eat and a stroll around the town.
I feel quite honoured and privileged to have presided over a conference which has brought together so many different disciplines.
Many of those presenting were disabled and brought forth issues and concerns from their own countries. Susan Duncan from the United States brought first-hand information and experience to the conference.
I have multiple sclerosis. It's a disease of the central nervous system, and what happens is the messages don't always get from my brain to the rest of my body in a timely or correct fashion. So what Joe does for me are things that my body can't do easily for itself.
Good boy, thank you.
He helps me to walk. I hold on to his harness, and he actually helps me to pull through my left side so that walking is a lot easier and I don't have to use my wheelchair as often. My grasp is not so good, so I tend to drop things a lot. He can pick things up for me. It's very difficult and tiring for me to bend over and get back up again. And when I can't see, he guides me.
Joe and Susan are now constant companions, but it was a twist of fate that brought them together.
Joe is a dog who was a stray, and he found his way into the Humane Society, to the pound. He was probably about 4 years old. He had no evidence of having any kind of training. He was not housebroken, he did not know how to walk on a leash, and he did not know how to keep himself in the house. Every time the door was open, he ran away. But he was an excellent learner once he got the idea of how things were done at our house.
Susan's need for a service dog had become obvious. The question was, should she train Joe herself, or should she apply for a dog that was already trained?
I called around to 23 programs that train service dogs, and I asked, can I get a dog from you? And I was told either I was not disabled enough to qualify for one of their trained dogs, or I would have to wait anywhere from 2 to 9 years to get a dog already trained for the kind of things I needed. And then I said, well, I can't wait that long. I'm going to try to train them myself. Can you help me? Can you give me some ideas about how to train them? And all those programs told me, no, we will not give you that information.
Susan, a registered nurse, has come a long way with Joe. She is currently the chairperson of the Delta Society's National Service Dog Committee, and she has some concerns.
There is no standardized certification process, which is one of the problems both with the trainers and the dogs that are produced. People can claim to be service dog trainers even if yesterday they were selling used cars. So there's no really control for quality on a consumer level. What really needs to happen is, I think the healthcare profession needs to exert some professional influence and demand better quality and better control of both the trainers, the dogs, and for educational purposes so that the public understands what these dogs can do, how to get them, and that there is recourse if there are problems with them. I think Joe and I have really a typical human-animal bond. It's really hard for me to evaluate it. It's very difficult to quantify a relationship like this. He's with me 24 hours a day, so in many respects it's almost like a spousal relationship in that you're constantly together. The difference is that Joe never says, "Why are you wearing that dress today?" He doesn't complain. He never says, "Excuse me, it's time for the football game." So it's just a matter of sort of melding our lives together and functioning as one rather than two independents.
Whether it's using animals to assist people with disabilities, scientific data on health benefits, or grieving the loss of a pet. No matter what the subject, people who gathered here from far and wide shared and learned.
The take-home message from this conference is that pets are good for people. We now have a vast body of scientific data supporting this, but this is perhaps something that pet owners have known all along.
This is the 7th time the conference has been held. The next Human-Animal Bond Conference will take place in Prague in 1998.
When we return, choosing and financing your dream home.
Ian Parker and Lisa Bendel have finished renovating their new home. It's been a long process that started before they even bought their house. Careful financial planning has made it possible for them to create their dream home. They've gained many insights along the way. Ian and Lisa finished remodeling their walkway, bathroom, and kitchen, and they're settling into their newly finished home. But it took a lot of careful planning to reach this stage. From the start, they've had to keep a number of considerations in mind. Their first step was to find a real estate agent who would understand their needs.
And you wouldn't have been able to put the car in the garage anyway.
That's right, because the ramp wouldn't come down.
They found real estate agent Susan Baker through a friend. Susan helped them out with their house hunting by finding out what they were looking for.
They said that they wanted a house in a safe neighborhood. They needed 2 or 3 bedrooms, a house that was not too far off the ground, a bungalow. A house that already had wheelchair access would be perfect, but that was almost impossible. We do have a field on the Toronto Real Estate Board computer for wheelchair access, but in the whole city of Toronto, you'd punch it in, you'd get 1, and it would end up not being the right neighborhood. So we just started looking for houses that could be converted easily.
But many of the homes Ian and Lisa looked at needed a lot of renovating.
Well, it was a learning experience for me. If the rooms were small and lots of walls, it just was too much work to make it really accessible. Big kitchens, big bathrooms were important. Space in the bedroom for a bed and dresser and room for the wheelchair to go around. So, it took a few times out to really get a handle on it, but I just listened to them.
She was great. She hadn't been particularly involved in looking for a barrier-free house or a modifiable house before, but she was open-minded and learned fast and basically, got to know us, and it got to the point where we'd arrive at a house and she'd be right in the back of Ian's vans lifting out his portable ramps and setting them up so we could get in the house.
After a month of active house hunting and a little luck, Ian and Lisa found their dream home.
It was a fluke in the first place that we even saw the house, because if it had been listed in the computer as a 1.5, we never would have looked at it. They drove by it, they called and said, we loved it, and they drove by it at night and the spotlights were on it, and it's a beautiful house. We called and tried to make an appointment, and there was some problem and we couldn't get in, and then the house was taken off the market. So I tried to call the people who owned the house directly. They were unlisted. And then a couple of days later, it just popped up again on the computer as a new listing. And I called Lisa, and I think we came out that very night and looked at it, and that was it. They loved it. And we put in an offer.
how much we could afford to spend on a house, we had to tack on not only the price of the house, but how much we thought the renovations would cost. And that became like the lump sum, and we would just, you know, get a mortgage accordingly.
The existing programs for renovating are very disappointing now. The Ontario had one and it was cut, and there was one through the municipalities, it cut, and there was one from the federal government.
But they didn't qualify because their combined income was too high.
So really nowadays you got to do it on your own. There's no assistance around, and that does make it tight.
But finding the right mortgage made things a little easier.
We got some good advice from a financial advisor, and I read some articles in the Globe Mail which talked about getting a mortgage. And one of the important things was it said shop around and go to different financial institutions and sort of build on what one will offer and take that to the next and say, can you better it? Because you've got buying power when you go. You're making a long-term commitment for a lot of money with them.
They all want your business.
Now all their planning is paying off.
I think we're going to live in this house a long time. We first started thinking we were probably going to buy a starter home and move in a few years. But
that's not the picture anymore.
No. When we saw this place and putting the work into it, we think we'll be here a long time.
You did very well.
Ian and Lisa have also made another long-term commitment. They're getting married in the spring. We send them our congratulations and wish them the very best for the future. This concludes our 4-part series on their home renovations. If you have any thoughts or suggestions on a series you'd like us to cover at DNET, drop us a line. Our address is coming up at the end of the show. And that's our show for this week. Season's greetings from all of us at Disability Network. Remember, we'd like you to write to us with your comments, story ideas, and suggestions for the new year, which is just around the corner. I'm Ming Wong.
And I'm Bill McQueen. Happy holidays. See you again next week. You can write to us at Disability Network, CBC Box 500, Station A, Toronto, M5W 1E6. That's Disability Network, CBC Box 500, Station A, Toronto, M5W 1E6. This program is brought to you in part by the Royal Bank of Canada, serving Canadians for 126 years, one customer at a time.